on this. But so to get started, the description of the presentation was talking about TDD, test-driven development, TDD's shortcomings. So I think it would be wise to see what those shortcomings are. So the way TDD works is that you start with tests. You write the tests first, and then you write the code. And it's kind of like there's a workflow somewhere there that people use to describe this. It's red, green, yellow. Red meaning you write the tests, they fail because you don't have any code. Then it's green because you write some code to the minimal amount of production code in order to be able to get those tests green, meaning running and passing. And then the yellow is you refactor. And this causes some issues. First of all, unit tests are inside out. They start at a very, very low level. You're testing, let's say, a class, or in Drupal's case, a module. And those tests are only for that module. They don't know how to talk to each other. This causes some pretty big issues when you want to test, for example, large applications such as websites, where you have a lot of flows, and those flows go through multiple modules. At the same time, it's really hard to test, for example, user interface applications, and so on and so on. So there's a sense of isolation with unit tests, where each unit test is kind of like its own ecosystem, and it doesn't know about the other stuff. Again, another problem is they're typically written by the programmer itself, because unit tests are code. Only the programmer can understand them. So the programmer writes the unit tests and then writes the code. Most likely, the programmer who writes the unit tests will also be the programmer writing the code, which, again, this is a huge issue, because if the programmer didn't understand the requirements and writes a bad test, then he will write bad code, which will pass the test. And of course, in the long term, this can be a problem. At the same time, they can take a long time. And the whole ecosystem of having a huge project where you have started with a lot of unit tests, when this happens, unit tests become increasingly more and more important to that project and to that project's ecosystem. And the moment you're going to try to change specification or refactor some of it, then bang, you have to refactor all those tests you've written at the beginning. And those tests probably will start breaking, and it will start like a Lego effect, where things keep falling. And another thing is that they're hard. Unit tests are hard. How many of you have used simple tests? Raise your hand. Not a lot of people. How many of you think simple test is easy and it's really good for newbies and people starting Drupal? Nobody. I wanted to say that simple test is kind of shit. So, because nobody loves it, I can say. And then, if we look at Drupal, there's simple test, and simple test is really, really hard. You get two websites. The website that runs the simple test, and then you have the website which gets initialized at each test, and then gets the test run onto it, which works, let's say, fine because for simple modules, but the moment you're going to try, for example, do something like this with a website that is the size of Demotix that I work with, it's going to be pretty much impossible, because you have to set up a site from scratch just to test a simple module. And this is going to prove to be impossible with a project that is a little bit complex. At the same time, those tests are weird, they look ugly, and even as, let's say, maybe junior, maybe medium programmer, it's going to be hard to actually understand how to write those tests and how to get meaningful things out of it. And this is why BDD is nice, and this is how BDD comes to the rescue. BDD is not necessarily a replacement for TDD, you can do both, and it's become recommended to do both. But it kind of picks up where TDD left off, and it uses TDD as a base. It's kind of like rethinking the approach to unit and acceptance testing. What it does is, first of all, it uses a common language, very simple, that can be used by anyone and can be understood by anyone, starting from your boss, your product owner, you, the junior programmer next to you, anyone can actually understand what that test means and can actually contribute to it and write some new tests. And because of that, because it's really, let's say, verbose and easily understood, BDD tests become not just a test, but you can use them as a starting point of a piece of implementation, but at the same time, it's also a product specification. And it's supported by a wide range of tools. So, you want to do continuous integration with Travis, you can do it. You have Jira, you can do it. Red Hat, Redmine, there's a plugin for that. So it's not something that's really like new and something like that. No, it's quite old. It's very supported, and for example, Drupal.org switched to BDD testing at some point ago. And all the tests which were run previous to the huge migration that took place yesterday, they moved to Drupal.7. In case you haven't noticed, it haven't been to Drupal.org, they moved to Drupal 7. They ditched simple test and whatever they were using, and they are using BDD now. Similarly, simple test is gone in Drupal 8, and they have PHP unit. So, the idea of behavior-driven development is to simplify the process of testing. And its purpose is to test both code and also behavior of the whole application, or the whole part of the application. So where test-driven development is about ensuring the behavior, BDD is about describing that behavior. And if you use Agile, you know about the concept of a user story. As a product owner, in order to get value from a product, I need to do something. And this is typically how, in Agile environments, product specifications are being made by user stories, which pretty much describe what the application needs to do for a particular user. And it has the components like the stakeholder, who am I, the effect, what do I want to get out of it, out of this feature, and the value, what happens inside the application when I do that. And the nice thing about BDD is that this user story becomes a test. You have this user story where you describe kind of like what this component is, what do I want to get out of it, and who is the stakeholder, what is the effect. And then you start creating some acceptance criteria or scenarios. And I will get into that a little bit later. But the idea is that the scenarios are pretty much a series of steps where you have some initial conditions, such as, given that I am on the homepage of DrupalCamp.pro, you have some triggers. When I follow the link login and I fill user field with my account name and I fill the password field with my password and I hit login, then you have outcomes. Then I should see logout, which means that the system logged me in and it shows me my account and logout. So this is how a BDD test looks. You're going to see that it's not programmer code, programmer speak. It's very verbose. This is a very simple test for testing the authentication on, I'm going to use the website of the conference with this. So I have the description of the feature at the top in order to change my information and add, let's say, sessions. As a registered Drupal user, I need to be able to authenticate. And then we have two scenarios. We have the user login scenario and the user logout. To test the login, I'm going to the home page. So given I'm on root, when I follow this link and I fill in this field with this text and this field with this text, and I press the login button, then something should happen. In my case, I should see my account. Similarly, if I want to test logout, that the system doesn't crash when I log out or something like that, I say, okay, given that I'm logged in on the site and I'm on the home page, when I follow the logout link, then I should see the login. And this is a test. This is all you need to actually have a test that does this. Compare this to, I don't know, PHP unit, compare this to simple test, and how hard would it have been to test the login and logout functionality of the site. So coming back to this this definition. So BDD is the second generation. It's a second generation because it kind of builds on top of TDD. And some people call it TDD 2.0. So it's outside in because its approach is to not come from the inside, but rather to look from the outside at the whole of the project and test the behavior of the whole project. It's pull-based because the way this works in an agile environment is you start with the whole general behavior and then you start pulling in small scenarios and small features and kind of going into a tree of features, issues, and all this kind of stuff. It's multiple stakeholder because suddenly the owners and the people interested in these tests are not just the programmer or the QA lead. They can be the client, they can be the boss, they can be anyone who understands these, understands the language, and can write some tests. It's high automation because given that this has started in an agile environment and it's primarily used as an agile tool, it needs to be able to be ran on demand automatically when you do some code push and all this kind of stuff. So it offers this. Most BDD tools are designed from the ground up to be able to be ran into a continuous integration, for example, situation or something like that. And it's an agile methodology because, well, it's used in agile teams. So, BDD in PHP. For this, you're going to use a tool called Behat. It's available at behat.org. It's open source software, of course, and it uses a language which is called Cucumber. Sorry, this is a mistake. It's not Cucumber, it's Gherkin. Cucumber or something. So, the language is called Gherkin. And the thing you saw before that I showed you, that's the Gherkin language. And this is great to test PHP apps as a, let's say, unit testy kind of way in the console. But if you want to run tests which go and do web tests using browsers, real browsers and stuff like that, you're going to use an extension called Mink. And the extension is available on behat.org as well. They're both part of the same language. And the way Mink works is that it has a set of drivers, which allow you to test, for example, your site using Selenium. And you can use Selenium to start Chrome, you can use Selenium to start Firefox and all that. Selenium, if you've used it, you're going to see that it spawns a new browser and you can actually look at what's happening and what the test does. But at the same time, there's different drivers for different things. For example, Zombie.js is a browser implementation done in JavaScript, and it's headless, which means that it doesn't need a graphic interface to run. So if you want to test, if you want to run your tests on Linux automatically without having to start a graphical interface, you're going to use Zombie.js. Qt is another web driver. And the cool thing about this is that Mink offers a unified API for all these drivers. So once you run your tests, you write your test and you're supporting code, you can switch these anytime, as opposed to before when you would write some Selenium tests and those would be able to work just with Selenium. So this is it, Behat and Mink, and it's really easy to install them. You're going to create a directory and you're going to create a file called composer.json. This is, if you haven't used Composer before, it's kind of like a package manager for PHP. And these are all on Behat's site, by the way. So you're going to require some packages. You're going to say, okay, I want it to be the development version, and then you run Composer. This is going to download and fetch and configure all these packages, and it's going to give you with a Behat and Mink nice empty set. And then you run Behat init, and this is going to create a couple of directories. It's going to prepare you to run those tests. Once you have this, you're going to have to configure Behat. So if you look here, I'm trying to configure the Mink extension, and I'm saying, okay, the base URL, the site I want to try it on is DrupalCamp.ro. The other drivers are empty because I don't want to use them. And I want to use, as a driver, I want to use Selenium, which has this host. Default session in JavaScript session means what driver is it going to use? It's going to use Selenium. The idea is that you can have multiple configurations like these. They're called profiles. So maybe you want to test with Selenium, then you can create another profile and say default session is zombie, and so on and so on, with different configuration variables, stuff like that. Okay, so I'm going to give a quick demo. Skip to Behat. So, as you saw, once you run Behat in it, it's going to create these directories, features, bootstrap. And in it, you need to write .feature files, which are your tests. And this is the test that I've shown you before. It's the test for authentication, and it's going to try to log in the user. I created last night this user, I hope it wasn't deleted. And then it's going to try to log out. And okay, so let's run this test. I need to start Selenium. If you would be using Zombie.js, this step wouldn't be necessary, but at the same time, you wouldn't be seeing anything on the screen. So Selenium is cool when you're writing tests because you can use it to debug things. Okay, so Selenium launched. Then write Behat. And Behat starts to run. It looks at all the features in the features directory. I only have one. Firefox is launching. It's going to DrupalCamp. Loads the login page, enters data into it, and I'm logged in. And bam, it crashes. It says, it doesn't know what given I am logged in means. The whole idea about Behat and Mink is that it comes with a set of predefined steps. And you can see them if you run, for example, Behat definition list. You see here all the steps that Behat offers out of the box. You can search for text, you can click checkboxes and buttons and go back and forward and do a lot of funky stuff, but all this funky stuff is kind of like what a browser can do and what a browser can see. Most likely, you will need to write some extra code. You will need to write some extra steps, like this step here, given that I'm logged in. This is a custom step, and what Behat is saying to me is, I don't know what this step means. You need to write it before I can actually do something with it. The problem with scenarios, and this is what you should be noticing now, is that they are run on a new session of the browser. So even if I logged in the previous session, when I do this next in the previous scenario, when I go to the user logout scenario, I'm automatically logged out because it's a new session. So this is why I need to log in again. And you can see the progress. So it's passed. 2 scenarios, 10 steps, all of them passed. And you can create as many features as you want. For example, I have another feature here called profile. Let's look at it. Not that. So the profile feature is, I should delete this. This is a simple feature where I want to see that updating my profile on the DrupalCamp website works. And I log in on the site, I go to my account, I follow the edit link, and then I start filling up those fields with some stuff. And I press save, and then the question is, what happens then, and how can I check that the profile has been saved? What the site does, it saves the information, it takes you back to the same page. And it shows a small overlay, a small pop-up. You probably have noticed that. ideally we should be able to see that A, that pop-up has appeared, and B, the pop-up contains the code, this is the text, the changes have been saved. And I've used this because I want to show you something else, which is we need to implement this step. So if I were to run this test, you can also run tests individually by specifying the So now it crashes because it doesn't have the definition of this new step that I've introduced. And the nice thing about these web drivers is that you can get a hold of them in this in a step and run arbitrary JavaScript, or use a different combination of asserts to be able to compose, let's say, a more advanced and custom condition. So I'm going to again copy some. When I'm implementing the step, you can see here how I can get the web session, and then I can do something like wait for 2 seconds, or until this JavaScript code evaluates to true. And what I'm doing here is I'm waiting for the better messages default div, which contains the little overlay that you get when you save your information, gets visible on the screen. If this doesn't happen, so for example the JavaScript broke and the pop-up doesn't work, this is an assert, and it's going to pretty much crash the test and say something is wrong. If we pass this, then I can use another function in the Mink API saying assert element contains text. I want to see if that div contains somewhere inside it the text that I've supplied, this one. Because as you see, all these steps, they are using regular expressions. So everything you see in like this, it's a parameter that can be sent to the function that handles the step. So now that we've implemented this, let's try to run the test again. It didn't work. It was working as an app. I didn't save the file. Yeah, let's try again. Also, when you run Behat, you can specify some different options so that there's a different level of verbosity, so you can actually use it to get a lot more debug information if something goes wrong and you don't know what happened. Things like that. And it passed. Now, assuming that, let's say, I would change this to this, the test should fail because the div will not contain that text anymore. And the test failed because I changed that text. Cool. So this was a short demo. Let's go back to presentation. So you've noticed that nothing that I did until now is Drupal specific. This site could have been written in Symfony. Behat doesn't get it. It's only using a web driver and similar, let's say, language to test all these things. But because we're a DrupalCamp, there is the Behat Drupal extension with that weird logo that I cannot explain. What it does, it provides step definitions for common testing scenarios that are specific to Drupal sites. It also allows you to, well, we have a Dodge Twitter account, it's awesome. So instead of trying to write, for example, let's create, I don't know, create a user which is belonging to the role an admin or whatever. This extension comes with a lot of steps that are already written for you. So you can just go ahead and add some very specific Drupal testing scenarios without you having to write any custom steps like you saw me doing before. In Composer.json, when you have all those modules, you just add this new one, Drupal extension. You configure it. This is like the minimal configuration option. You're going to see on the side there's a lot of other options, like you have to give it a path to your code. When you're doing this, when you're going to use this extension, the disadvantage is that you're going to need to have the site local so that it can access the code and it can use Drupal to do magic behind the scenes. And after you configure it, you are given steps like these. Given I'm logged in as a user with authenticated user role. What this does is that it automatically creates a temporary user. It gives that user the authenticated user role, and then it logs that user in. So instead of you having to go to user register, filling information and all that, this does it behind the scenes automatically. It has some Drupal-specific lingo, such as heading and region. Given the cache has been cleared, or when I run cron. These are all steps that this extension offers out of the box. Or if you want to create nodes or users or tags, you can use something like this. Given page nodes and title page 1 and 2, what this does is automatically creates two nodes of type page and gives it title page 1 and page 2. Similarly, you can create nodes with fields and all this kind of stuff. It's a really cool extension. It's really, really cool. Thank you. There was something else. I forgot, I'm sorry. There was another slide that didn't get saved. And one of the cool things about BDD is that you can run it in the cloud. There's various services. The one I recommend you look at is called Saucelabs. And what this allows you is to run your tests in the cloud on, let's say, all the browsers that they have, including desktop and mobile. You can launch your tests, the tests similar to what you saw me doing here. You launch them from the command line, then you go to their site and you can see them running in parallel on various browsers. And you can click on them and you can actually see how the tests are doing and what is happening in those browsers. They also have a free plan which gives you, I think, 1,000 minutes of free testing. So if you get into BDD, you should definitely look at Saucelabs because it could do cross browser JavaScript testing really, really easy. Thank you again. And I'm going to use this moment to plug ourselves. We are hiring people who are good with, I don't know, AngularJS, Node.js, new cool stuff, and who also know a bit of Drupal. So if you're interested, come talk to me afterwards today, tomorrow. Questions?
How much do you pay? I'm just kidding.
We can talk.
Hi. I have one.
I don't see.
I'm here. I have one question about continuous integration and testing. How this is this demo was about testing locally. How you can test on server? Let's say.
Well,
we can use BDD or.
Yeah. So as I was saying, it supports Travis CI, which is kind of like the factor for continuous integration. So there's various options here. You can go very simple, such as, let's say you have a Git repository on your site, on your server. You set up a Git hook every time someone pushes some code, it runs Behat and does all those tests. As I said, those tests don't need to be run with Selenium. You can run them using Zombie.js without having anything start up browsers and all that. You can run them in a headless environment. So this is like a very simple version that you can do is to just, I don't know, anytime some code is pushed, just run some commands, run these tests. But no, what you would want to do is install, let's say, Travis, and Travis allows you to pretty much set up things like that. When some code gets pushed, prepare this site to be tested, run these Behat commands, output, if it fails, email these people that test failed, and so on and so on. So yeah, you can do it. It takes a bit of work, but it can be integrated with any continuous integration toolkit, software package, whatever out there.
And what about unit testing in Drupal? We can use how much?
Yeah, I don't think I said that, but BDD is not meant to replace TDD. It's kind of meant to be used together. So you use BDD for the general behavior stuff, but as you go and drill in the code, it's really helpful to actually use TDD. And you know, for Drupal 8, you're going to be using PHP unit. For Drupal 7 and 6, you can use simple tests. You can use BDD to do some unit type testing. It's all about preference, but it's not meant to replace it. It's kind of like use them together. Okay.
From your experience, how visible it is to let everyone or any people write tests?
I don't have experience in that, I'm sorry. The company I work for develops one product, we're a small team, so we never got into that. I'm assuming you're thinking about, you know, the client coming. I would say it's bad, to a certain degree. Of course, that doesn't mean that anyone from HR to the client needs to write tests, that's very stupid. But the idea here is that, you know, agile methodology kind of makes the client a very important person in the whole process, and it tries to make the client as part of the defining specification. And one of the things it tries to solve is especially that the client now, those things that the client can write, those things become tests, and he can understand them, as opposed to having someone else write tests from scratch, trying to understand what the client meant and so on and so on. But yeah, definitely, you don't want 10 people working on the same huge test, easy test, or breaking other people's stuff and things like that. But the idea is that more people can use it than just the programmers who sit there and write their own little test. Anyone else? Back.
Okay, so my question is, everything we've seen is how to test interactions. Is it possible to test, let's say, CSS, or how things flow in the page? Because sometimes CSS breaks, not only user experience, user interactions.
Not really. I could say that CSS is not code. But no, for CSS you should be using something else. There's a lot of services out there which enable you to run in the cloud, you know, see your site in 10 different browsers and see what breaks and what not.
Okay,
you can use...
This is not automated. This means that someone has to look. I'm interested if there is some sort of automation that says like, this box should be 100 pixels from this box.
You can actually do something like that if you want, and you're hardcore. If you saw me at some point doing putting some jQuery code.
Okay, yes, I saw.
You can actually execute arbitrary JavaScript code
this helps,
in there. So you could say jQuery div height equals, it's not 100, then bam, the test failed. So you could do that.
Okay. This is nice, yes.
You could do whatever you want in code in there, but you know, out of the box, no, it doesn't have anything that helps you with this kind of stuff.
Okay.
Like positions. a question in the back.
Hi. Is the testing process always that fast? I mean, how can I see if elements are clicked, buttons? Can you set the delay?
You shouldn't. The idea here is that these tests would be run, or high automation, as it said. You shouldn't run these tests manually. You shouldn't look at them. They should be somewhere behind the scenes, just telling you the code is fine or the code fails. Now, if you want to see it in the context of debugging, what you can do is create, I guess, a custom step and do a JavaScript sleep, basically, of a second between each step. And this way, you're going to see things more slower. But no, this is dependent on the processor and the speed of the browser and all that. So with JavaScript, you could do something like that. Just to put a couple of sleeps in there and see how things get done.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. More questions? No, I think we're done. Thank you.